The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
Well, Beth and I realized that we haven't done any good old-fashioned hauntings in a while. So this week, we're going to bring all you wanderers not one, but two stories about haunted places. And for my story tonight, I'm going to start off with telling you all about the Occidental Hotel in Buffalo, Wyoming, which is one of those places that if Beth and I lived nearby, I'm pretty sure we'd spend a lot of time there. Standing outside the Wild West era hotel and saloon looks like your typical row of brick storefronts from the 1800s. But inside the once incredible famous hotel is really cool. Every room looks authentic, as if it's a throwback to the Wild West. Each guest room is unique while capturing a specific look of the early 1900s. The Bordello suite is decorated in a rich wine color, from the flowered wallpaper to the brocade-style bedspread on the iron bed. The Outlaw suite looks exactly how you'd expect a cowboy's hotel room to look, if he were staying in a high-class hotel, of course. It has a brass bed and dark walnut furnishings. But it's the main lobby and saloon that are right up our alley. Just that perfect mix of cool antiques, original fixtures, and ambiance. It's the kind of place where I really think that you could lose yourself in the history and feel as if you really have stepped back in time. Which, of course, is exactly what the owners are going for. It's just a pure bonus that the Occidental Hotel is said to be the most haunted hotel in Wyoming. So, Buffalo, Wyoming wasn't called Buffalo right at the beginning. According to BuffaloWyoming.org, in 1879, a group of travelers on the Bozeman Trail decided to stop on the banks of Clear Creek. One of the travelers, a man named Charles Buell, decided that it was so lovely right in that spot that he was going to live right there. So he pitched his tent and waved goodbye to his fellow travelers. Not long after, a couple hungry gold miners stopped by and asked if they might share his shelter and fire for a bit. Buell agreed. These miners, who had struck some gold, asked Buell if there was a bank nearby. Buell admitted that there was nothing nearby, but he offered to hide their gold for them. He lifted up a heap of buffalo hides in the corner of his tent to reveal a deep hole. The pleased miners deposited their loot for safekeeping. So, in just that single interaction between Buell and the miners, the first hotel, restaurant, and bank of Buffalo was established. And because it was such a pretty spot, and perfect for people to stop at during their travels along the Bozeman Trail, Buffalo grew into a prosperous Wild West town. Now, that sounds like such an incredible story. But it might not be the real way Buffalo got its name. In 1880, because of the growing number of travelers, Charles Buell built an actual hotel along Clear Creek, which was a simple log structure. And he and his business partner, A.J. McCrae, decided to name it the Occidental, a word which basically means Western or inhabitants of countries of the West. After a few other buildings were added to the main street, the settlers decided their town needed an official name. They met at the Occidental Hotel and each wrote a suggestion on a slip of paper and threw them into a hat. One of the settlers, a man named Will Hart, wrote down the name of his hometown, Buffalo, New York. And it just happened to be his slip of paper that was drawn out of the hat. The Occidental Hotel quickly became a meeting place for county commissioners, and before long, additions were added and improvements were made, until it was considered a rather high-class hotel. Now, despite being damaged by floods twice, once in 1895 and again in 1912, it eventually covered an entire block. But back in 1890, according to BuffaloWyoming.org, a room cost $2.50 a day, and meals were served around the clock. There was a full-service bar, card and billiards room, a barber shop, and a grand lobby. Although it still hasn't been proven 100%, there have been rumors for years that part of the hotel operated as a bordella. But Buffalo Bill Cody and Calamity Jane spent quite a bit of time there, not necessarily in the hotel, but most definitely in the Occidental's very well-known saloon. Calamity Jane did consider the Occidental Hotel her headquarters when she drove freight wagons along the Bozeman Trail. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid spent some time there also, as did famous cattle detective and killer Tom Horn. Frontier sheriffs Frank Canton and Red Angus also occasionally grabbed a few drinks in the saloon. But it wasn't just the Wild West gunslingers that frequented the Occidental. President Teddy Roosevelt also stayed there quite a bit, and Western author Owen Wister, who wrote The Virginian, stayed there as well. The Virginian was published in 1902 and is considered the first great Western novel. Historians believe Wister based several of his characters on real-life cowboys that he observed while staying at the Occidental, and that the shootout at the end of the novel is based on a shootout that he actually witnessed in real life, right outside the hotel's doors. According to the hotel's official website, despite the reputation of the hotel, the saloon at the Occidental was your typical rough-and-tumble Wild West saloon. High-stakes poker games could last for days. And, quote, in the rip-roaring days of early Wyoming, the saloon at the Occidental Hotel was famous far and wide. In the barroom, the lawful and the lawless played faro and poker, flirted with pretty ladies, drank copious quantities of powerful spirits, and occasionally shot up the place.
Sounds like our kind of place.
Yeah, I could see myself as a gunslinger there, and when I've had enough to drink and won all my winnings at poker, going visiting you at the bordello.
Yes, because that's where I would be, for sure.
Nope, you'd be curled up on a chair somewhere with a book.
That does sound more realistic.
Yeah, with a shawl around you.
Maybe I'd have a shotgun under my skirt, and I would, ward off all of the drunken gunslingers.
That does sound like you, though.
I know.
By 1908, the clientele had changed, and the rough saloon went with it. Instead, an elegant drinking establishment was put in its place, including stained glass accents, an embossed tin ceiling, and a 25-foot-long bar was brought in piece by wagon. But, with that said, that didn't mean that things didn't sometimes get a little rowdy still. If you just look up, you might spot one of the many bullet holes in the ceiling. The Occidental Hotel and Saloon prospered for the next couple of decades, but the Great Depression hit Buffalo hard, and the Smith family, who now owned the hotel, did everything that they could to keep the place, including renting rooms out to locals as full-time living spaces. Luckily, Margaret Smith had a keen eye for history, and did her best to preserve as much of it as she could, including documenting the many anecdotes about events at the hotel. By the 1980s, however, the Occidental was in very rough shape. And by that, I mean that it was on the verge of being demolished. But somehow, fate intervened, and the building remained standing. The dilapidated building was purchased in 1997 by John and Dawn Wexo and Dawn's daughter, Zoe Dawson. The Wexos turned major parts of the hotel into a living history museum, and they've worked hard to bring the hotel back to how it looked in 1910. In 2015, Jackie and David Stewart purchased the hotel. Today, you can see live bands perform in the saloon every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. You can eat dinner in the award-winning Virginian restaurant or grab breakfast from the Busy Bee Cafe. The hotel still has several original features, like the embossed tin ceiling and the 25-foot-long bar. You can also spend the night in one of the 18 suites or single rooms, if you don't mind the possibility of sharing the space with a ghost or two. Stories of the Occidental being haunted began during times when the hotel was being renovated, which always seems to be the case. According to Ghostlandia.com, several contractors claimed that they heard the distinct sound of spurs jingling on the back stairs as they worked. One contractor had an unnerving experience one day when he looked up from his work and saw a little girl standing in the middle of the next room. But the funny thing is that this room was a demolition area, full of random 2x4s and blocks of concrete just strewn about. His immediate reaction was concern. It definitely wasn't a safe place for her to be there. But as he carefully made his way around the 2x4s and the concrete blocks, going towards her, she turned and walked away, and then rounded a corner right out of sight. When he turned the corner himself, she was nowhere to be found. She just poofed into thin air.
That would be creepy when you have concern for a child and you think there's actually a child there, and then you get there and discovered, no, not so much.
Nope. Time to pick up your tools and get the hell out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the staff of the Occidental have seen the little girl also, according to U.S. Ghost Adventures. They affectionately call her Emily. They believe that she died in the hotel from either cholera or typhoid fever, and she was around the age of 7 at the time. Some people even believe that she was the daughter of one of the women who worked at the unconfirmed bordello. This is because she's seen the most often in and around the room known as the bordello suite, the room that I think Beth would probably be staying in.
The one I'd be the most at home in, is that what you're trying to say?
Right. The staff say that Emily's apparition is quite thin, and she has long dark hair. In an article on the CowboyDailyState.com website, a waitress at the Busy Bee Cafe, Penny Ramirez, talked about one time when 2 different girls who worked at the hotel for the summer each said that they had seen a little girl with long dark hair hiding behind a door as if she was playing hide and seek with them. But guests have encountered Emily as well. She's known for tapping people on the shoulder and pulling on pant legs to get their attention. She occasionally bounces a ball in the hallways and then laughs. And she's also been known to keep guests up at night by bouncing on the bed. But she only does that to guests that she doesn't particularly like. Like one man who checked out in the middle of the night because Emily wouldn't let him sleep. The hotel staff later found out that he was a wanted felon. So it sounds like Emily's watching out for the place.
Yeah, she's very protective.
Right. She also apparently likes to play with children who are staying at the hotel. Ramirez says that the staff have found notes from living children addressed to the little girl that they had fun playing with.
Oh.
That's freaking creepy.
Oh.
Like I said before, I don't mind ghosts or apparitions or whatever you want to call them when they're adults or animals, but not children.
Yeah.
It's just too creepy.
Yeah, and they wouldn't have known her name, right? So it would have been addressed to, the little girl that I played with. Ugh.
But Penny herself has also had some experiences that she just can't explain. As I'd mentioned earlier, the saloon offers live music 3 nights a week. And Ramirez says in the article that quite a few times on Fridays, she often feels as if she's walked through cobwebs. Now, she wonders if it's residual energy that gets amped up by the Thursday night jam sessions. There was one Thursday night when she went into the hotel lobby alone after everyone else had left, and she heard the distinct sound of a single piano key being played. At first, she thought maybe it was a cell phone that someone had left behind, but when she heard it again, she knew it was undoubtedly a piano key. And lastly, she talked about a time when a couple of guests were running a spirit box app on their phone, and they heard the name Richard come through. Ramirez doesn't speculate who Richard might have been, but later that night, she heard a man's voice say her name in the empty saloon. The saloon seems to be a particular hot spot, especially for moving objects. According to the Cowboy Daily State article, bar employee Canessa Van said that she witnessed both a bottle of wine and whiskey just fall off a shelf for no apparent reason. She also witnessed bottles of wine just spontaneously pop their corks. Glasses in the bar will just shatter for no apparent reason as well. Another employee at the Occidental Hotel named Joe, who was from Italy, said that while he cleaned the rooms, he would have earbuds in so he could just listen to music. He frequently felt as if objects moved on their own, especially the chairs. He said that there were also numerous times when he'd catch sight of someone's shadow out of the corner of his eye and stop what he was doing because he thought someone was coming to check in on him. But then there would be no one there. He basically said that he listened to music while he worked as a way to ignore the strange things that he was seeing. So, as I'd said before, guests have had experiences also. The Prairie Cowboy Room apparently has a wandering spirit that woke up one guest in the middle of the night. The man said that he literally saw a whoosh of something go right past the end of the bed. He felt instantly that it was a ghost, but he knew that if he woke his wife up and told her about it, that she'd insist that they just leave. So he just lied there quietly. Guests to the hotel have also reported the covers being yanked off of them.
Nope. That's one of my biggest fears.
I know.
I don't like that.
Guess what room you'll be staying in. And both the bathroom and closet doors in room 18 are known to both open and shut on their own. There's an old iron on the floor in room 56, which I assume is meant to be used as a door stopper, because we do that. We have one here in the house. One guest apparently was in bed on the verge of sleep when he heard the iron actually move across the floor. He got up to look, and sure enough, it wasn't in the same spot as it was when he had laid down to go to bed. So he picked it up and put it back in its spot. But when he laid back down and heard it move a second time, he said out loud that he was just going to leave it exactly where they wanted it to be, and he wished the ghost or ghost a good night. I guess that's one way to deal with it.
Yep.
But the creepiest guest experience at the hotel was shared by the desk clerk, Nancy Leonard, who said a couple told her while they were checking out the Herbert Hoover room that they had smelled strong women's perfume the night before. But they brushed it off and went to bed. But while they were in the bed, laying down, they both felt a third body slide into bed between them and just lay there. God.
It's a little creepy.
That is a little creepy. Yikes. I wonder who it tried to cuddle with.
I don't know.
Can you imagine a ghost spooning you?
No.
Now, that bed-sharing ghost just might be Margaret Smith, but it seems highly unlikely. Although Margaret Smith's ghost is actually seen as often as Emily's. Margaret Smith was the former owner who kept such good historical records about the Occidental. According to Ghostlandia.com, Margaret's apparition is a tall, imposing figure who is seen in Victorian-era clothes, often floating down the hallways as if she's making sure all of the guests are well taken care of. Apparently, Teddy Roosevelt is also seen at the Occidental as well, but he's usually in the library and appearing as if he's getting ready for a fishing trip. But through all my digging on the interwebs, I couldn't find any specific details about it.
I hate when that happens. When they say something like that and then you can't find anything specific.
Right. So where's it coming from?
Right.
So, the Occidental Hotel really does look like a pretty cool place to stay at, and one I'd definitely like to visit. And of course, I'd like to spend the night there also and get Beth the suite with the ghost that tears the covers off you in the middle of the night.
That's nice. Do you have some pent-up hidden aggression towards me that I don't know about?
I don't know. Would I know that? Is it something I'd be conscious of?
I don't know. It seems to be coming out for some reason. Maybe I should be
it's after
worried.
Valentine's Day, so I shouldn't have any pent-up aggressions. If anything, I should be spent. I should have no ambition at all.
Ambition or aggression.
Right. And we'll be back right after this quick break.
Hey, did you know? During the blackouts in England during World War II, a man named Anthony Pratt and his wife Elva decided to create their very own board game to pass the time. During the 20s and 30s, Pratt had been a traveling entertainer, performing at various parties held in lavish mansions. One such mansion, named Tudor Close in Rottingdean, included guests like Cary Grant and Betty Davis. But Pratt was more than a musician. He was also an avid murder mystery fan, and he and Elva set about to design a game that included a lavish mansion with many guests. By 2025, over 150 million copies of the popular board game had been sold. You might know it as Clue. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we're back, and let's see where Beth's mind traveled for this week's episode.
It's traveling to another haunted place. and I'm very excited about it. So, the Italianate-style Peel Mansion in Bentonville, Arkansas, has existed since 1875. It's not a huge home, but with its pale brown stucco exterior and white trim, it does resemble a rather fancy gingerbread house. It's named after Colonel Samuel West Peel, who has a pretty interesting life story. And the rumors of his afterlife are pretty interesting too. In fact, one of the hauntings at the mansion is totally unique, since it was said to be haunted by someone who wasn't even dead. Samuel Peel was born near Batesville, Arkansas, to Elizabeth West Peel and John Wilson in 1831. When Peel's father died when Samuel was 4, he was sent to live with his maternal grandparents. He attended public school, and as a teenager, he worked in his father's store. When he was in his 20s, he worked as a deputy court clerk from 1858 to 1860. He married Mary Emmeline Berry in 1853, and the couple eventually had 9 children together. They initially settled in Carrollton. But in 1861, Peel entered the Confederate Army as a private, and he quickly climbed the ranks. First, he was elected major of the 3rd Arkansas Infantry Regiment, which initially was considered just a ragtag band of country boys, but they proved themselves in battle. Peel then earned the rank of colonel of the 4th Arkansas Infantry Regiment, where he fought in the Battle of Wilson's Creek near Springfield, Missouri, and the Battle of Prairie Grove back in Arkansas, which secured the Union's control of the northwest part of the state. When Peel returned home to Carrollton, he discovered that his home had been burned to the ground. He was basically penniless and homeless, so Peel decided to study law under his brother-in-law, Judge James Middleton Pittman. Peel passed the bar in 1865 and began practicing in Carrollton. He promised his wife Mary that one day they'd live in a grand mansion, just like the one she had grown up in back in Alabama. By 1867, the Peel family had moved to Bentonville, a rather prosperous town. Peel continued to practice law, and he grew quite the reputation as a successful lawyer. He was appointed the position of prosecuting attorney for the 4th Judicial District of Arkansas by Governor Baxter, a position he held until 1876. But a year earlier, in 1875, Peel made good on his promise to Mary, and the construction of their 14-room mansion was complete. It had a central hipped-roof tower and large arched windows. The exterior stucco wasn't added until later renovations, which gives the home that gingerbread house look that I mentioned earlier. Inside, it has 8 fireplaces, chandeliers, 12.5-foot ceilings, and a rare Anglo-Japanese mantel in the library. There are 7 rooms on the 1st floor and 7 rooms on the 2nd floor. The house originally functioned as a farmhouse, surrounded by a 180-acre apple orchard. But Colonel Peel didn't have a ton of time for farming, since in 1883 he was the first Democrat from Arkansas elected to Congress, where he served on the U.S. House of Representatives for the next decade. He specifically dealt with railroad and interstate commerce, agricultural experimental stations, and the survey of Indian lands and tribes. That was when he became specifically interested in Indian affairs, which led to him being chairman of the Committee on Indian Affairs, which meant that he was in charge of the care, education, and management of Native American tribes and their land. Because of his law background, he also dealt with land right-of-way issues and making sure that tribes were compensated fairly for their land. Apparently, he held tribal council meetings on the front lawn of the mansion, and it wasn't unusual to see temporary Indian camps in the yard. Treaties were even signed literally in his front yard. Peel worked very hard to make sure the Native Americans in Arkansas were treated fairly, although there's no clear indication of how he may have personally felt about their plight. But as a lawyer, he made sure they got everything they could in compensation for being forced to give up their land. According to Mary Eichenberger's 2021 article, The Legal and Political Career of Samuel West Peel, on the University of Arkansas Honors blog, Colonel Peel did argue that Indian lands should be subdivided in a way that the tribal leaders did not want, but that they deserved a fair price no matter what. When asked by a reporter if he felt the Native Americans deserved their land in 1887, he said, quote, "Yes, indeed, every acre. It is theirs by contract for a valuable consideration, and they should not be deprived of any of it without their consent, and then for full compensation." End quote. Peel ran for re-election in 1892, but he lost. So he returned to Bentonville and resumed his law practice. A year later, he was appointed the General Attorney for the Choctaw Nation by Chief Green McCurtain. 2 years later, he took on the additional role as the General Attorney for the Chickasaw Nation also. So now, rather than being a congressman representing the U.S. government in Indian affairs, he was basically on the other side, representing the two tribal nations' interests in Congress. But again, there is some question over whether he did it out of genuine concern or for the paycheck. Mary Peel passed away in 1902. And the following year, Colonel Peel put the mansion up for sale and moved out. It didn't sell until 1910 to a J.J. Jones. Colonel Peel lived until age 93, and he died in 1924. Over the next 8 decades, the mansion passed through 5 owners, including, believe it or not, Walmart. But I'll get to that later. Several $million have gone into renovating the mansion. During one renovation, according to onlyanarkansas.com, bits of the blue wallpaper that hung when Colonel Peel lived in the house were discovered. The wallpaper was recreated so that it now covers the walls once more. The pink wallpaper in the parlor is an exact replica of the wallpaper Mary Peel chose back in 1875. Today, the mansion is a museum and an event space, popular for weddings. It's filled with Victorian-era antiques, including the Lincoln rocking chair, which actually belonged to Colonel and Mrs. Peel. The chair is called that, by the way, because it's the same kind of chair Lincoln was sitting in at Ford's Theater. The china on the dining table is the same china Colonel Peel used during his years in Congress. There's also a rocking horse that was once played with by the Peel children. But back to Walmart. In 1991, former mansion owner Mike Murphy sold the house to Walmart Incorporated, which then donated the property to the Peel House Foundation a year later. So, not exactly what you'd expect, but definitely commendable on the part of Walmart.
Yeah, I wonder why they did that.
I don't know, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's not something that you would expect Walmart to do.
Not at all. But there's a family in between the Peels and today that I want to tell you about. The English family. In the 1920s, W.L. English, an agricultural agent for the Frisco Railroad, purchased the Peel Mansion. He and his family moved in, excited about maintaining the apple orchard and living in such a grand house. He is considered the one most likely to have added the stucco to the exterior. According to VintageBentonville.com, Mr. and Mrs. English had 4 children, 2 boys and twin girls, Marjorie and Elizabeth. The English children had the run of the farm, and I can imagine it was a pretty great place to grow up. One day, while little Marjorie was playing tennis, she began having terrible pains in her side. Her parents called for the doctor, but he couldn't find anything wrong with her. What he didn't realize was that Marjorie's appendix was on the opposite side of her body, something that can happen with identical mirror image twins. The doctor left, and poor Marjorie was still in pain, especially when her appendix ruptured. This time, a surgeon and his nurse arrived, and 2 of the kitchen tables were placed side by side in an upstairs bedroom for Marjorie to lie on during the emergency surgery. Allegedly, the infection was so bad that the nurse fainted, and the doctor determined there was nothing he could do, so he didn't even bother sewing little Marjorie back up. The surgeon left, but the nurse stayed behind to care for the dying child. Marjorie lay in and out of consciousness for 10 days. At one point, she woke up and saw her father crying at her bedside. When she asked why, he said it was because she was so sick. Marjorie's last words were, quote, "Don't worry, I feel so wonderful," end quote. Mr. English called for the nurse, who gently pulled the sheet over Marjorie's body. Marjorie felt herself being lifted up, and then her body passed right through the bedroom wall. She floated out into a beautiful, peaceful meadow, and when she saw a bright light beckoning to her, she floated towards it. But she was stopped by some sort of invisible force, and no matter how hard she tried to go around it to reach the light, she just couldn't. So she turned herself around and floated back the way she had come. 5 hours had passed in real time. Her twin, Elizabeth, was standing beside her sister's body when she saw the sheet move. Marjorie was not dead. They dressed her wound and moved her into a downstairs bedroom where she recovered for an entire year. Unbeknownst to her, the tenant workers on the farm whispered that Marjorie's soul wasn't able to rejoin her body because the sheet over her body had barred its way back in. Marjorie herself never told anyone about her experience floating in the meadow towards the light. Marjorie grew up and got married. At some point in her adult life, she brought her husband back to Bentonville to see her old home. The new owners welcomed her in and let the couple walk around inside. When she passed the door to the room where her surgery had taken place, she wanted to take a look inside, but she found that the door was locked. When she asked why, she got a strange explanation. The family left it locked because of the little girl that haunted it. They would hear her crying every now and then, and they knew it was the ghost of a little girl who had died in the room. Marjorie, who was a little shocked, tried to explain that she was that little girl, but the family didn't believe her. Marjorie passed away again in the year 2000. But apparently her spirit had somehow haunted that room for 40 years, even though she was very much alive. Now, we have heard about this before, although it is pretty rare, when someone haunts a place even though they aren't dead. So, did part of Marjorie's soul stay behind at the Peel Mansion? And did it somehow manifest as residual energy that played out that traumatic experience over and over for 4 decades? It is like she had a near-death experience, but only part of her soul returned, which, like I said, is pretty weird. But when you think about it, it also has to be weird to find out that you've been haunting a place as a child, even though you're very much alive.
Well, I'd like to know if her sister had a shared experience of her near-death experience.
Oh, yeah, since they never talked about it.
But you gotta think about it this way. That went on for 10 days. She went through a lot. I mean, she was in a lot of pain. She was in and out of consciousness. So that would have left quite the impression upon the room.
Right. Like an imprint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's one way of explaining it. But can you imagine if she would have continued living there? Would she too have the experience of her spirit or energy haunting that room?
I hadn't even thought about that. So like her adult self hearing her child self?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it would be residual.
Right.
And it's a haunting because it's an impression upon the energy. It's the energy that stayed behind, right? That just keeps repeating itself.
Right. Like the stone tape theory.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could see that happening.
Huh.
That'd have been cool.
Well, especially if she didn't recognize that it was herself.
Yes.
And then what if you do recognize that it's yourself? How do you
deal with it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a psychologist.
Well, something else that I found kind of interesting is that Colonel Peel and his wife Mary also had twins, a boy and a girl, but they were born and died on the same day in 1872. So I don't think it really means anything other than it just struck me as an interesting coincidence.
Right. That's just tragic.
Right.
Has nothing to do with the haunting.
No. But still, what are the chances of having twins and then to have 2 sets of twins in the same house when you're not related?
Right.
That's a little bit of a coincidence.
That is strange.
Right.
Huh.
The Peel Mansion doesn't make a big deal about its hauntings. They don't offer ghost tours, and they don't advertise their haunted reputation. And yet, little snippets of the alleged ghostly activity still make their way onto the internet. There's Marjorie, of course, but there's also Colonel Peel and his daughter, Minnie Bell. According to mosthauntedplacesintheworld.com, staff at the Peel Mansion and some guests attending weddings and other events have seen a shadow figure now and then that resembles Colonel Peel. Sometimes objects move on their own. But Colonel Peel is most active in the library, the room where he spent a great deal of his time in life. Staff have reported loud noises coming from the room and also footsteps walking across the floor. Minnie Bell was the sixth child of Mary and Colonel Peel. She was born in 1871 and lived to the age of 89. She married a judge and outlived him by 20 years. She died in Bentonville and is buried in the Bentonville Cemetery. One thing Minnie Bell loved to do was to play the piano, and especially for her father. One common report at the Peel Mansion is hearing the sound of a piano being played. But when staff approach the room to see who is playing, the music always stops before they can enter the room. Minnie Bell's apparition, when it is seen, is the classic young woman in white. The Peel Mansion is a house with a lot of history, and for the most part, it seems to have been a happy place for most of its inhabitants. Colonel Peel and Minnie Bell might still be there because it was a happy place for them. As for Marjorie, that's still one of the most interesting ghost stories that I've ever heard.
Yeah, it was amazing. I wouldn't mind hearing a piano playing in the other room.
Well, we don't have a piano, so that would be even creepier.
That it would. But I think it would be kind of fun. You know, if you had a piano in another room, once in a while you hear somebody kind of tickling the ivories.
Yeah.
I think it'd be quite the game to try to catch it playing.
Think about how annoying you find it when the Echo Dot thingy in there tries to play music off of your phone all the time. Sometimes it's like 6 times a day when it says it's connected to your phone, and we're like, no, stop it.
Yeah, that's when I unconnect it to Bluetooth and it stops. Usually I forget because when we leave, I have my Bluetooth connected to our car.
Right. But you think a phantom piano would be okay? It wouldn't annoy you?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that would be rather interesting.
You just want free piano music in the house. That's what you want.
Yeah, that's it. Well, like I said, the Peel Mansion. Pretty cool story.
Pretty cool.
I thought mine was really cool. Yours
was even better.
Shut up.
Well, as always, if you would like to know more, you can always check our sources in our show notes.
That you can. And with that said, join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.